The blistering desert sun beat down mercilessly on Emma Atkins' tear-streaked face as she bounced her wailing infant on her hip, standing paralyzed at the dusty crossroads. Behind her lay the ruins of what she once called life. Ahead, nothing but unknown territory and uncertain fate. This was her punishment for believing in love, stranded in the middle of nowhere with a 3-month-old baby, and barely enough supplies to last another day. "Hush now, Lily," she whispered to her daughter, whose tiny face was scrunched up in distress, cheeks flushed crimson from crying and the relentless heat. "Please, sweetie, Mama needs to think." Emma's cotton dress clung to her perspiring skin as she shifted her gaze between the 2 dirt roads stretching endlessly in opposite directions. The wooden signpost offered little comfort. One weathered arrow pointed east toward Shoshone, Wyoming territory, still some 20 miles away. The other indicated the mining settlement of Cooper's Ridge to the west, the place she'd fled in the dead of night. The baby's cries grew more insistent, echoing across the barren landscape. Emma's canteen was nearly empty, and the meager provisions she'd hastily packed were dwindling. She had escaped with nothing but her daughter, a small bundle of clothes, and the silver locket containing her mother's portrait, the only family heirloom she possessed. "Lord above, what have I done?" she murmured, dabbing at Lily's forehead with her handkerchief. The decision to leave had seemed so clear when Thomas had raised his hand to her for the 3rd time that week, his alcohol-fueled rage escalating from verbal abuse to violence. She couldn't raise her child in such an environment, not after he'd threatened the baby too. The distant sound of hoofbeats made Emma's heart skip. She spun around, squinting against the sun's harsh glare. A lone rider approached from the north, his silhouette gradually taking shape against the vast expanse of sky and earth. Her first instinct was to run, but where to? There was no shelter, no place to hide on this exposed stretch of terrain. As the rider drew closer, Emma clutched Lily tighter to her chest. The man sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dust-covered duster coat. The brim of his Stetson was pulled low, shading eyes that seemed to assess her situation with a single sweeping glance. "Madam," he said simply, tipping his hat as he reined his chestnut stallion to a stop. His voice was deep, with a hint of roughness that spoke of many years under the western sun. "Seems you're in a spot of trouble." Emma straightened her spine. Despite her precarious situation, she wouldn't appear weak before a stranger. "We're fine, sir, just resting a moment." The cowboy's gaze flickered to the crying infant, then back to Emma's face, noting the bruise that she'd failed to conceal completely with her bonnet. "That baby needs water and shade, madam, and if you don't mind my saying, you look like you could use some yourself." His directness was disarming. Emma swallowed hard, pride warring with desperation. "I'm heading to Shoshone," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "That's so." The cowboy dismounted with fluid grace that belied his tall frame. He removed his gloves and approached slowly, careful not to alarm her. "Name's Isaac Lawrence." "Most folks call me Ike." "Emma Atkins," she replied hesitantly, "and this is Lily." Isaac nodded at the child, whose cries had diminished to whimpers at the sight of the newcomer. "Pleased to meet you both." He reached for his canteen. "May I? The little one sounds mighty thirsty." Emma nodded gratefully, accepting the water. She dampened her handkerchief first and wiped Lily's flushed face before taking a modest sip herself. "Where are you coming from, Mrs. Atkins?" Isaac asked, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp, taking in her disheveled appearance and the small carpet bag at her feet. Emma hesitated. "Cooper's Ridge." A shadow passed over Isaac's face. "Mining town's no place for a woman and child alone." He glanced meaningfully at the westward road. "Especially not that one. Some men there have forgotten what it means to be civilized. I'm aware, Emma said softly, unconsciously touching her cheekbone where Thomas's ring had left its mark. Isaac's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You got folks in Shoshone? No, sir, I just... Emma's voice faltered. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. She'd heard Shoshone was a proper town with a church and school, the kind of place where a woman might find respectable work and raise a child in peace. Isaac studied her for a long moment. His face, weathered by sun and wind, revealed little of his thoughts. Finally, he said, Mrs. Atkins, I don't make a habit of prying into others' affairs, but it strikes me that you're running from something or someone. Emma's silence confirmed his suspicion. I've got a ranch about 12 miles northwest of Shoshone. Good water, plenty of shade. I'm heading there now. He gestured to the eastern road. You're welcome to ride with me. Get yourself and the little one out of this heat. Emma stiffened. I couldn't impose no imposition, Isaac cut in. My sister Nora runs the house. Been pestering me to bring home more than just cattle for a change. A hint of a smile softened his otherwise stern features. She'd have my hide if I left a woman and baby at a crossroads with night coming on. As if on cue, Lily began to cry again, her tiny fists balling up in frustration. Emma bounced her gently, torn between caution and necessity. Isaac moved back to his horse, giving her space to decide. Truth is, Mrs. Atkins, Cooper's Ridge is only 4 miles back. If someone's looking for you, they'll find you before long. Fear flashed in Emma's eyes. I can't go back there. Isaac nodded, then gestured toward the eastern path. Then you'll go where I'm headed, not back there. It wasn't a command, despite the firmness of his words. It was an offer of protection, delivered with the straightforward pragmatism of a man who understood the harsh realities of frontier life. In that moment, Emma made her choice. She had fled one dangerous situation. She would have to trust her instincts about this taciturn cowboy with the kind eyes. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Isaac nodded once, then efficiently secured her carpet bag to his saddle. Ever ridden double, Mrs. Atkins? Not since I was a girl, she admitted. It ain't elegant, but it'll get us there. He helped her mount, making sure she was secure with Lily before swinging up behind her. The proximity was uncomfortable at first, but Isaac maintained a respectful distance as much as the saddle allowed. As they rode away from the crossroads, Emma felt a curious mixture of trepidation and relief. She had no way of knowing if she'd just made the wisest or the most foolish decision of her life, entrusting herself and her baby to this stranger. But as the miles passed and Lily finally drifted to sleep against her chest, the steady rhythm of the horse's hoofbeats and Isaac Lawrence's solid presence at her back gave her the first sense of security she'd felt in months. The landscape gradually transformed as they traveled, the barren flatlands giving way to rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and the occasional juniper. Isaac pointed out landmarks along the way, a particular rock formation, a creek that ran year-round, speaking in short, practical sentences that required no response but served to break the silence. That's Thunder Basin, he said, nodding toward the distant mountains that rose dramatically against the horizon. Good hunting up there. Deer mostly, some elk if you're patient. Emma followed his gaze, noticing how the setting sun painted the peaks with hues of gold and purple. It's beautiful country, she ventured. Hard country, Isaac corrected, though without harshness, but fair if you understand its ways. As twilight descended, Isaac guided his horse off the main trail and up a gentle slope. Cresting the hill, Emma gasped softly. Below them stretched a valley cradling a modest but well-maintained ranch. A 2-story house stood at its center, windows glowing with warm lamplight. Several outbuildings surrounded it, and in the distance, Cattle grazed peacefully in fenced pastures. "Welcome to Cottonwood Ranch, Mrs. Atkins," Isaac said quietly. The horse picked its way carefully down the slope. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the last rays of sunlight. She wore a practical blue dress, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. "Isaac Lawrence, who have you brought home this time?" she called, her voice carrying a note of good-natured exasperation. "Strays, Nora. The usual," he replied, dismounting smoothly before helping Emma down. Nora Lawrence hurried down the porch steps, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she took in Emma's appearance and the sleeping baby. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside right away." Emma found herself ushered into a spacious kitchen, warm and fragrant with the smell of fresh bread and stew. Lily stirred and fussed as the change in temperature and surroundings roused her from sleep. When was the last time this little one had a proper meal? Nora asked, already moving about the kitchen with purposeful efficiency. "This morning," Emma admitted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. I didn't bring much with me." "Nora," Isaac said from the doorway, his tone conveying something beyond the simple utterance of his sister's name. Nora glanced at him, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Let's get you settled first," she said to Emma. "You can feed the baby while I warm up some supper, then we'll talk." Emma was shown to a small but comfortable bedroom off the main hallway. A basin of warm water appeared for washing, along with a clean nightgown that Nora insisted she borrow. "It might be a bit large, but it's better than sleeping in that dusty dress." Left alone with Lily, Emma finally allowed herself to relax marginally. The room was simply furnished a bed with a colorful quilt, a rocking chair by the window, a chest of drawers, and a small mirror. It was more comfort than she'd known in over a year. After feeding and changing Lily, who had settled into contented gurgles now that she was clean and full, Emma ventured back to the kitchen. She found Isaac and Nora seated at the table, their conversation ceasing abruptly at her appearance. "Come eat," Nora said warmly, gesturing to the place set for her. "You must be famished." The stew was rich and flavorful, the bread still warm from the oven. Emma hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful passed her lips. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, Lily dozing in Emma's lap. Finally, Isaac cleared his throat. "Mrs. Atkins, Nora and I would like to understand your situation better if you're willing to share it." Emma set down her spoon, meeting his steady gaze. "I suppose I owe you that much after your kindness." "You don't owe us anything," Nora interjected. "But if we're to help you, we need to know what we're dealing with." Taking a deep breath, Emma began her story. She told them about meeting Thomas Atkins 2 years ago when he'd come to the boarding house where she worked in St. Louis. He'd been charming then, full of grand promises about the fortune to be made in the Wyoming Territory's mining operations. They'd married quickly, and she'd followed him west with stars in her eyes, only to discover that the real Thomas emerged after a few months of marriage possessive, quick-tempered, and increasingly violent, especially when drinking. "When I discovered I was expecting, I prayed it would change him," Emma said softly, stroking Lily's downy head. "For a while it seemed to. He was almost the man I'd first met, but after she was born—" Her voice faltered. "He resented her?" Nora asked gently. Emma nodded. "He wanted a son. Called her a squalling burden, said I trapped him." Her fingers traced the fading bruise on her cheekbone. 3 nights ago he came home in a rage, lost money gambling. When Lily cried, She couldn't continue. "He threatened the child," Isaac finished for her, his voice flat but his eyes flashing with contained anger. "Yes." Emma met his gaze unflinchingly. "I waited until he passed out, took what little money I could find, some food, and left. I walked most of the way, caught a ride on a freight wagon for a few miles yesterday. And you have nowhere to go? Nora asked. My parents died when I was 16. I have an aunt in Boston, but we haven't spoken in years. Emma's shoulders sagged slightly. I thought in Shoshone, perhaps I could find work, maybe as a seamstress or cook. Isaac and Nora exchanged another of their wordless communications. Finally, Nora reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. You'll stay here until you're on your feet. I could use the help around the house, and it would be a blessing to have a baby's laughter filling these rooms. I couldn't possibly, Emma began. It's decided, Isaac said with quiet authority, unless you'd prefer other arrangements. Emma looked between the siblings, overwhelmed by their generosity. Thank you, she whispered. But what if? What if Thomas comes looking for me? Isaac's expression hardened. Let me worry about that, Mrs. Atkins. No one will harm you or your daughter on my land. The conviction in his voice should have reassured her, but instead it sent a chill down Emma's spine. This quiet, reserved man suddenly revealed a glimpse of steel beneath his calm exterior. She wondered what other depths lay hidden behind those thoughtful eyes. As if sensing her discomfort, Nora steered the conversation to lighter topics: the upcoming harvest festival in Shoshone, the new calves born last week, the apple trees that promised a good crop this year. By the time they finished the meal, Emma felt the weight of her journey catching up with her. You should rest, Nora insisted, taking Lily so Emma could rise. Everything looks brighter after a good night's sleep. Emma gratefully followed Nora back to the bedroom, where a small crate had been lined with soft blankets to serve as a makeshift crib. Isaac made this when our neighbor's grandchild visited last spring, Nora explained, gently laying Lily in the cozy nest. He's handy that way. Once alone again, Emma sank onto the edge of the bed. The events of the day washed over her: the desperate fear at the crossroads, the unexpected rescue, the kindness of these strangers. She should have been exhausted beyond thought, but her mind raced. What kind of man was Isaac Lawrence, this solemn cowboy who'd brought her home like a stray cat? And what would tomorrow bring in this new, unfamiliar refuge? As she finally drifted towards sleep, the last image in her mind was of Isaac's face as he'd made his promise, not the gentle expression he'd worn when speaking of his land, but the resolute countenance of a man who would defend what he considered his responsibility, no matter the cost. Dawn broke clear and crisp over Cottonwood Ranch. Emma woke to Lily's soft cooing and the aroma of coffee and bacon wafting under the door. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was, but as consciousness fully returned, so did the events of the previous day. She dressed quickly in her travel-worn clothes, feeling somewhat self-conscious about her appearance after seeing Nora's neat, practical attire. After tending to Lily, she made her way to the kitchen, where she found Nora busy at the stove. "Good morning," Nora greeted cheerfully. "I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months," Emma admitted. "May I help with breakfast?" "Sit and feed that precious baby first," Nora insisted. "Isaac's been out since before sunrise checking on a sick calf. He'll be famished when he returns." As if summoned by his name, the back door opened, and Isaac entered, bringing with him the scents of morning air and horse. He'd already been busy. His sleeves were rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, and his face bore smudges of dirt. "Morning," he nodded to Emma before crossing to the wash basin. "Calf's doing better," he reported to his sister as he scrubbed his hands. "That new liniment from Doc Simmons seems to be working." "Thank goodness," Nora replied, sliding a platter of bacon onto the table. "We can't afford to lose any more this season." Emma observed their easy interaction, noting the deep bond between the siblings. As they all settled at the table, she ventured a question. "Have you two always lived here?" Isaac exchanged a glance with Nora before answering. "Our father established this ranch in '52. Came out from Pennsylvania with big dreams and little else. Mama joined him the next year," Nora continued, passing a plate of biscuits to Emma. "Isaac was born right here in this house during a blizzard in '54. And Nora followed 2 years later, much more considerately during pleasant weather," Isaac added with a rare hint of humor. "What happened to your parents?" Emma asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. "Forgive me, I shouldn't pry." "It's all right," Nora assured her. "Pa died 6 years ago. His heart gave out during Roundup. Mama followed him 8 months later. The doctor called it pneumonia, but Isaac and I know she died of grief." "They were devoted to each other," Isaac said quietly. "Never saw one without the other nearby." The wistfulness in his tone surprised Emma. This taciturn cowboy apparently held more romantic notions than his practical exterior suggested. "And neither of you married?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. Nora chuckled. "I was engaged once to a cavalry lieutenant stationed at Fort Laramie. He was reassigned to Arizona Territory, promised to send for me." Her smile turned sad. "The letter never came. And you?" Emma found herself looking directly at Isaac, curiosity overcoming propriety. His eyes met hers briefly before returning to his plate. "Never found the time." Nora made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed snort. "My brother has high standards and low sociability, Mrs. Atkins. A challenging combination for courtship." "Nora," Isaac warned, though without heat. "Well, it's true," his sister persisted. "Half the eligible women in 3 counties have set their caps for you, and you barely notice." A flush crept up Isaac's neck, disappearing into his collar. "Don't we have work to discuss?" Taking pity on him, Nora turned the conversation to the day's tasks. Emma listened, gradually understanding the rhythm of life at Cottonwood Ranch. The siblings operated with well-established routines, each responsible for different aspects of the ranch's functioning. "Mrs. Atkins," Isaac said as he rose from the table, "if you're amenable, I thought to ride into Shoshone this afternoon. There are some supplies we need, and you might want to purchase a few necessities." Surprise and uncertainty flickered across Emma's face. I have very little money." "Consider it an advance on your wages," Nora interjected smoothly. "We agreed you'd help around here, didn't we?" Emma's pride warred with practicality. She desperately needed essentials for herself and Lily: clean clothes, proper baby items, personal necessities. "That's very kind," she finally said. "Thank you." Isaac nodded briskly. "We'll leave after the midday meal, should be back before sunset." As he strode from the kitchen, Emma turned to Nora. "Your brother is difficult to read." Nora's expression softened. "Isaac feels things deeply, but he's never been one for showing it. Our father was the same way." She began clearing the dishes. "Since they died, he's carried the weight of this place on his shoulders, feels responsible for everything and everyone under his care, including random women and babies he finds at Crossroads," Emma asked wryly. "Especially them," Nora replied with a knowing smile. "Now let me show you around the house. If you're to help me, you should know where things are kept." The morning passed quickly as Emma familiarized herself with the Lawrence home. It was larger than it appeared from outside. 4 bedrooms upstairs, a parlor, dining room, and spacious kitchen on the main floor, plus a root cellar and storage rooms. Everything was clean and well maintained, though with the practical simplicity common to working ranches. Nora proved to be an easy companion, chatting freely as they worked together. By noon, Emma felt more at ease than she had in longer than she could remember. The simple acts of hanging laundry on the line and kneading bread dough, while Lily napped in her makeshift crib, created a sense of normalcy that had been missing from her life. After the midday meal, Emma changed into her cleanest dress and wrapped Lily snugly in her blanket. Isaac was waiting by the wagon, his expression unreadable as always. "I've hitched the wagon instead of riding," he explained as he helped her up to the seat. "More comfortable for you and the baby." The consideration touched Emma. "Thank you, Mr. Lawrence." "Isaac," he corrected, climbing up beside her. "If you're staying with us, no need for formalities." "Then you must call me Emma," she replied, adjusting Lily on her lap. He nodded once, then clicked to the horses. As they pulled away from the ranch, Emma glanced back to see Nora waving from the porch. The journey to Shoshone took just over an hour. They traveled mostly in comfortable silence, with Isaac occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or explaining aspects of ranch life. Emma was struck by how different he seemed from Thomas, where her husband had been all flash and empty promises. Isaac was substance and understated capability. Shoshone revealed itself as they crested a hill, a proper town with several streets radiating from a central square. Buildings of wood and brick lined the main thoroughfare, their facades advertising mercantiles, a hotel, a bank, and various shops. A white church steeple rose prominently at the north end of town. "Not as big as St. Louis," Isaac commented, mistaking Emma's intense scrutiny for disappointment. "No, it's perfect," she breathed. "A real town." Isaac's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Been growing steady. Got a schoolhouse now, and Doc Simmons moved his practice here permanent last year. Even have a newspaper, though it only prints weekly." He guided the wagon to a hitching post outside the largest store, its sign proclaiming Hodgson's General Mercantile. Before helping Emma down, he hesitated. "Emma, I should warn you, small towns run on gossip. People will be curious about you." Understanding his concern, she nodded. "What should I say?" Isaac considered for a moment. "The truth, but not all of it. You're a widow come to help my sister at the ranch. No need to mention Cooper's Ridge or other details." "A widow," Emma repeated, touching her bare ring finger. She had sold her wedding band in Cooper's Ridge for traveling money. Seeing her discomfort, Isaac reached into his pocket and produced a simple gold band. "Belonged to my mother. Might help avoid questions." The thoughtfulness of the gesture rendered Emma momentarily speechless. She slipped the ring onto her finger, surprised when it fit nearly perfectly. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside the mercantile, Emma's prediction about curiosity proved accurate. Every patron turned to stare as they entered, whispers immediately erupting behind raised hands. "Isaac Lawrence, twice in 1 month. The world must be ending," called the proprietor, a jovial man with impressive side whiskers. "Need supplies, Hodgson," Isaac replied, tipping his hat. "And Mrs. Atkins here requires some personal items." "Mrs. Atkins?" The shopkeeper's eyes darted between them, curiosity practically radiating from him. "My sister's new helper," Isaac said evenly. "Recently widowed. She and her daughter will be staying at Cottonwood for a while." The explanation seemed to satisfy Hodgson, though Emma felt the weight of speculative glances as she moved through the store, selecting necessities with Isaac's quiet assistance. He seemed to know exactly what a woman and baby might need, adding items to their basket without comment: soft flannel for diapers, a proper baby blanket, several yards of sturdy cotton fabric that could be made into clothing. When they approached the counter to settle their bill, a well-dressed woman who had been examining ribbons turned to intercept them. "Isaac Lawrence, aren't you going to introduce me to your guest?" Isaac's posture stiffened slightly. "Mrs. Blackburn, this is Mrs. Emma Atkins." "Emma, Natalie Blackburn. Her husband owns the bank." "Charmed," Mrs. Blackburn said, though her assessing gaze suggested otherwise. "What brings you to our little town, Mrs. Atkins?" "Seeking a fresh start," Emma replied simply, meeting the woman's gaze with composure she didn't entirely feel. "How fortunate that Isaac found you." Something in Mrs. Blackburn's tone made the innocent words sound vaguely scandalous. "The church social is next Saturday. You must attend. Everyone will be so interested to meet you." Before Emma could respond, Isaac placed a protective hand at the small of her back. "We'll see if Nora can spare her. If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Blackburn, we have more errands before heading back." Outside, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Is she always so?" "Intrusive," Isaac finished. "Natalie Blackburn considers herself the arbiter of Shoshone society. Best to stay on her good side if you can, but don't let her intimidate you." Their next stop was the doctor's office, where Isaac insisted Lily receive a checkup. Doc Simmons, a kindly older man with spectacles perpetually sliding down his nose, pronounced the baby healthy despite her recent ordeal. "You've got yourself a resilient little one here," he told Emma as he handed Lily back. "Just needs regular feeding and lots of love, which I can see she's getting." As they completed their remaining errands, Emma became increasingly aware of Isaac's protective presence. He stayed close without hovering, his quiet authority seeming to deflect the most intrusive curiosity from townspeople. By the time they headed back to the ranch, Emma had met the minister, the blacksmith, the postmaster, and numerous shopkeepers, all of whom clearly respected Isaac even if they found his taciturn nature somewhat intimidating. "Thank you," Emma said as Shoshone receded behind them. "For everything today." Isaac glanced at her, then back at the road. "No need for thanks." "There is," she insisted gently. "You've shown me nothing but kindness when you had no obligation to do so. I want you to know I appreciate it and I won't take advantage." He was silent for so long that Emma thought he might not respond. Finally, he said, "When I was 12, my father and I found a woman on the trail not far from our ranch. She'd been beaten badly, left for dead by her husband. Pa brought her home. Mama nursed her back to health." His hands tightened on the reins. 2 weeks later, the husband showed up demanding his property back. Pa refused. There was a fight. Emma's breath caught. "What happened?" Pa won. Isaac's voice was flat. "The man never troubled anyone again. But the woman, she stayed with us nearly a year, helping Mama, teaching Nora and me our letters. Eventually married the blacksmith in Laramie, had a passel of kids." He glanced at her again, his expression solemn. "My father taught me that a man protects those who need protecting. It's not kindness, Emma. It's duty." The simplicity of his moral code struck Emma deeply. In a world where her own husband had failed in the most fundamental responsibilities of care and protection, Isaac's straightforward sense of duty seemed almost radical in comparison. "Still," she said softly, "thank you." He nodded once, and they continued toward Cottonwood Ranch in companionable silence. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Emma found herself studying Isaac's profile. The strong line of his jaw, the slight creases at the corners of his eyes, the way his hands handled the reins with confident ease, all spoke of a man comfortable with himself and his place in the world. For the first time since fleeing Cooper's Ridge, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, a future where she and Lily might know security, perhaps even happiness. It was a dangerous thought, she knew, but watching the golden light of sunset illuminate Isaac Lawrence's weathered face, she couldn't quite suppress the tiny spark of hope that flickered to life within her heart. The days at Cottonwood Ranch quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma rose with the dawn, tending to Lily before helping Nora prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. Mornings were filled with household tasks: laundry, baking, preserving the garden's abundant harvest. Afternoons often found her sewing, transforming the fabric purchased in Shoshone into practical garments for herself and Lily. Isaac was a constant yet unobtrusive presence. He left early each morning to work with his men, returning for the midday meal covered in dust or mud, depending on the day's tasks. Emma became accustomed to his quiet ways, learning to read the subtle shifts in his expression that others might miss: the slight crinkling around his eyes when something amused him, the almost imperceptible softening of his mouth when Lily cooed at him from her blanket on the floor. 2 weeks after her arrival, Emma was hanging laundry in the yard when she noticed Isaac in the corral, working with a young horse. She paused, linens forgotten in her hands, mesmerized by the interplay between man and animal. Isaac moved with confident grace, his voice a low murmur that didn't carry to where she stood but clearly soothed the nervous colt. "He has a way with the difficult ones," Nora said, appearing beside her with another basket of washing. "Animals or people?" Emma flushed, embarrassed at being caught staring. "He's very patient." "Isaac believes anything worth doing takes time," Nora replied, pinning a shirt to the line. "That colt threw him twice yesterday, but he'll be back every day until they understand each other." "What was he like as a boy?" Emma asked impulsively. Nora's smile was fond. "Serious, even then. Always watching, thinking before speaking. Pa used to say Isaac was born old." She laughed softly. "But he could be mischievous too, in his quiet way. Once replaced the sugar in the cook's canister with salt just to see what would happen." The image of a young Isaac executing such a prank made Emma laugh. "What did happen?" "Cook chased him around the yard with a wooden spoon, threatening dire consequences. Pa made him apologize and do the cook's chores for a week." Nora glanced at her brother, who had now coaxed the colt into accepting a gentle touch on its flank. "He never complained about the punishment, just nodded and did what was expected." "He's a good man," Emma said softly. "The best," Nora agreed, giving Emma a sidelong glance. "And he's noticed you too, you know." Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. "Nora, I know you're not ready," Nora interrupted gently. "You've been through too much and it's too soon." "I'm just saying, when you are ready, my brother would be worth considering." Before Emma could formulate a response, Lily's cries sounded from inside the house. "She's awake from her nap," she said, grateful for the interruption. "I should go to her." As she hurried inside, Emma couldn't shake Nora's words or the fluttering sensation they had triggered in her chest. The idea of any man's attention, even someone as honorable as Isaac, awakened a complicated mix of emotions. Fear, certainly, after her experience with Thomas, but also a tentative yearning that both surprised and alarmed her. That evening after supper, Isaac invited Emma to join him on the porch. "Night's cooling down nicely," he observed as they settled into rocking chairs, Lily sleeping peacefully in Emma's arms. "First stars are coming out." Emma tilted her face to the darkening sky, where indeed the first bright pinpricks of starlight were becoming visible. "It's beautiful here," she said. "So open and vast." "Too vast for some," Isaac replied. "Some folks can't abide the space, the silence." "I find it peaceful," Emma admitted. In St. Louis, there was always noise: people, carriages, factories. Even in Cooper's Ridge, the mining operations never truly stopped. She stroked Lily's fine hair. "Here, I can hear myself think." They rocked in companionable silence for several minutes, the only sounds the creaking of the chairs and the distant lowing of cattle. Finally, Isaac cleared his throat. "Been meaning to ask," he began, his tone carefully neutral. "Have you given thought to what you'll do come winter?" The question caught Emma off guard. Though she'd been at Cottonwood Ranch for only 2 weeks, she'd somehow stopped thinking beyond each day's immediate concerns. "I suppose I haven't," she admitted. "Is my presence becoming a burden?" "No," Isaac said quickly. "Just the opposite. Nora's happier with you here. Ranch runs smoother with an extra pair of hands." He paused. "Just wanted you to know you're welcome to stay, through winter and beyond if it suits you." The offer, delivered in Isaac's straightforward manner, touched Emma deeply. "That's very generous." "It's practical," he countered, though the slight tightening of his hands on the chair arms betrayed some deeper emotion. "Wyoming winters can be harsh. Not a good time to be starting over somewhere new, especially with a little one." "Then we'll stay, at least until spring," Emma decided. "If you're certain we're not imposing." Isaac's response was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. He stiffened, rising in one fluid motion. "Stay here," he instructed, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip that Emma had never seen him draw. Heart racing, Emma clutched Lily closer as Isaac stepped off the porch into the gathering darkness. She heard murmured voices, then relaxed slightly as she recognized the tones of friendly greeting rather than confrontation. "Sheriff," Isaac said, leading a weather-beaten man in a dust-covered duster up to the porch. "This is Mrs. Atkins, my sister's new helper, Emma. Sheriff Wade Callahan from Shoshone." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Madam, sorry to disturb your evening, but I needed to speak with Lawrence here about a matter that couldn't wait." "I'll leave you to your business," Emma said, rising. "It was nice to meet you, Sheriff." "Actually, madam," the sheriff said, his expression turning grave, "this concerns you as well." Emma sank back into her chair, a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach. "Me?" Sheriff Callahan exchanged a glance with Isaac before continuing. "Got word from Cooper's Ridge. A man named Thomas Atkins has been asking about a woman and baby matching your description. Offering a reward for information on your whereabouts." The blood drained from Emma's face. "He's looking for us." "Yes, madam, I'm afraid so." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Now, I don't know the particulars of your situation, but I do know that legally, a husband has certain rights regarding his wife and child." "He has no rights," Isaac cut in, his voice cold as steel. "Not after what he did." Sheriff Callahan held up a placating hand. "I'm not here to take anyone anywhere, Lawrence. Just thought you should know he's asking questions, showing your wife's picture around. Won't be long before someone makes the connection to Shoshone." "I'm not his wife anymore," Emma said, finding her voice. "Not in any way that matters." The sheriff studied her thoughtfully. "I understand, madam, but the law might see things differently unless you've got divorce papers." "What can we do?" Isaac asked, his tone making it clear he intended to do something with or without legal sanction. "For now, nothing," Sheriff Callahan replied. "He hasn't broken any laws that I know of, but if he shows up in Shoshone causing trouble, that's different." He fixed Isaac with a pointed look. "Just don't take matters into your own hands, Lawrence. I know your father's ways, but we're more civilized now." "Are we?" Isaac's question hung in the air, unanswered. After the sheriff departed, promising to send word if he learned anything more, Emma remained frozen in her chair. The safe haven she'd begun to imagine for herself, and Lily suddenly seemed terribly fragile. "He'll find us," she whispered. Isaac knelt before her, his eyes intent on hers. "Emma, listen to me. No harm will come to you or Lily while I draw breath. That's a promise." "You don't know him," Emma protested. "When Thomas is angry, he's like a different person, cruel, calculating." "And I'm the man whose land you're on," Isaac replied simply. "Around here, that counts for something." His certainty should have reassured her, but Emma had learned the hard way that a determined man with a grudge was a dangerous force. "I won't bring trouble to your door," she said. Perhaps it would be better if Lily and I moved on. Where? Isaac challenged. With winter coming, with a man searching for you, he shook his head firmly. No, Emma, running isn't the answer. Then what is? Isaac's expression hardened with resolve. We prepare. We take precautions. And if necessary, we face him together. The fierce protection in his voice stirred something in Emma, not just gratitude, but a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. This man, who had known her such a short time, was willing to stand between her and danger without hesitation. Why? She asked softly. Why would you risk yourself for us? Isaac seemed taken aback by the question, as if the answer were self-evident. Because it's right, he said finally. Then, with a gentleness that contrasted with his stern demeanor, he added, and because in 2 weeks, you and Lily have brought something to this ranch that's been missing for a long time. What's that? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Life, Isaac answered simply. Purpose beyond just surviving from season to season. He rose abruptly, as if uncomfortable with his own candor. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll make plans. As Emma watched him stride into the darkness toward the bunkhouse, Lily stirred against her chest, small fingers clutching at her dress. The baby's innocent dependence renewed Emma's determination. She would not let fear drive her away from this place, where, against all odds, she had begun to feel safe, nor from the man whose quiet strength had made that safety possible. The next morning brought a whirlwind of activity as Isaac implemented what he called sensible precautions. 2 ranch hands were reassigned to patrol the property boundaries. Nora was instructed to keep a loaded shotgun within reach at all times. Emma was given a crash course in handling a small revolver, despite her initial reluctance. I've never fired a gun, she protested as Isaac placed the weapon in her hands. Pray you never need to, he replied grimly. But if the time comes, you'll be grateful for the option. Throughout the day, Emma caught glimpses of the Lawrence siblings' frontier upbringing. Beneath Nora's cheerful domesticity and Isaac's stoic practicality lay a steely resilience born of lives spent in a land that demanded constant vigilance. Their preparations were not panicked, but methodical, the actions of people accustomed to facing threats directly. That evening, they gathered in the kitchen to review their plans. Maps were spread across the table as Isaac outlined defensive positions and escape routes. If trouble comes and I'm not here, get to the root cellar, he instructed Emma. There's a false wall at the back leading to a storage space our father built during Indian troubles years back. Food, water, blankets are already there. The matter-of-fact way he discussed potential violence chilled Emma. This wasn't the life she wanted for Lily, constantly looking over her shoulder, preparing for the worst. How long must we live this way? She asked, frustration edging her voice. Like prisoners in our own home. Isaac and Nora exchanged glances. Until we're certain you're safe, Nora replied. And when will that be? When Thomas is? Emma couldn't bring herself to finish the thought. There are legal options, Isaac said carefully. Sheriff Callahan mentioned speaking to Judge Harmon next time he's in Shoshone. With testimony about your husband's violence, you might obtain a divorce and custody of Lily. Hope flickered briefly in Emma's chest, only to be extinguished by reality. It would be my word against his. What judge would believe a woman over her husband without proof? The bruises he left on you were proof, Isaac said, a muscle working in his jaw. They've faded, Emma countered. And even if they hadn't, men have rights over their wives that the law recognizes. Not the right to beat them, Nora interjected fiercely. Perhaps not morally, but legally. Emma shook her head. I've seen too many women trapped in impossible situations to believe justice will be on my side. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Finally, Isaac pushed back from the table. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we stay alert and carry on. Carry on, Emma repeated, the words somehow both inadequate and necessary. The days that followed established a new normal at Cottonwood Ranch. Outwardly, life continued much as before. Chores were completed, meals prepared, cattle tended. But an undercurrent of tension ran beneath the surface of every interaction. Isaac rode out each morning with his men but always returned by midday to check on the house. Ranch hands patrolled in shifts. Doors that had previously stood open were now locked at night. Despite these precautions, autumn arrived with spectacular beauty, transforming the landscape into a canvas of gold and crimson. The apple trees yielded their bounty, keeping Emma and Nora busy with preserving. The harvest festival in Shoshone approached, and despite initial misgivings, Isaac agreed they should attend. Hiding away won't help, he reasoned. Better to show ourselves as part of the community, safety in numbers. The day of the festival dawned clear and crisp. Emma dressed in her new blue calico dress, sewn during evening hours by lamplight. She had fashioned a matching bonnet for Lily, whose chubby cheeks and ready smile had made her a favorite among the ranch hands. As Emma prepared to leave her room, she caught sight of her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. The woman who gazed back at her bore little resemblance to the desperate figure who had stood at the Crossroads just over a month ago. Her cheeks had filled out, her eyes had lost their haunted look, and there was color in her face that hadn't been there before. Downstairs, she found Isaac waiting in the parlor, dressed in his Sunday best clean black trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, looking more like a prosperous rancher than the dusty cowboy who'd found her on the trail. "You look lovely," he said simply, when she appeared with Lily in her arms. The compliment, delivered without flourish but with evident sincerity, brought warmth to Emma's cheeks. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." A hint of color rose above Isaac's collar. Before he could respond, Nora bustled in, resplendent in a russet dress that complemented her dark hair. "My, don't we clean up nicely?" she teased, breaking the moment of awkwardness. The journey to Shoshone was filled with Nora's excited chatter about the festival. Emma found herself caught up in the anticipation, despite her lingering concerns. The opportunity to enjoy simple pleasures, music, dancing, community seemed precious after weeks of watchfulness. Shoshone's main square had been transformed for the occasion. Bunting and banners hung from buildings, tables laden with food lined one side, and a platform had been erected for musicians. Children darted between groups of adults, their laughter carrying on the autumn air. As Isaac helped the women down from the wagon, they were immediately surrounded by townspeople eager to greet them. Emma was surprised to find herself welcomed warmly, introduced as the Lawrence's friend from back east. The story of her widowhood had apparently been accepted without question. "Mrs. Atkins, how delightful that you could join us." Mrs. Blackburn approached, resplendent in a burgundy dress that must have been ordered from Denver or even Chicago. "And this must be your daughter, may I?" Emma hesitated briefly before allowing the banker's wife to coo over Lily, who regarded the stranger with solemn interest. "She's a beauty," Mrs. Blackburn declared. "Takes after her mother." "Thank you," Emma replied, sensing genuine admiration beneath the woman's formal manner. "You must meet everyone," Mrs. Blackburn continued, linking her arm through Emma's. "Isaac, you won't mind if I borrow Mrs. Atkins for introductions." Though her tone framed it as a question, Mrs. Blackburn was already steering Emma away before Isaac could object. For the next hour, Emma found herself circulating through Shoshone society, meeting the doctor's wife, the minister's sister, the milliner, and countless others whose names blurred together. Lily, thankfully, remained content in her arms, occasionally drawing attention with a gurgle or smile. "You're causing quite a stir," Mrs. Blackburn confided as they paused near the refreshment table. "A pretty young widow appearing suddenly at Cottonwood Ranch. It's the most interesting thing to happen in Shoshone all year." Emma's guard rose. "I hope I haven't been the subject of unseemly gossip." "Oh, nothing unseemly," Mrs. Blackburn assured her with a wave of her fan. "Just curiosity. Isaac Lawrence has never shown interest in any woman, yet he brings you to his home without hesitation." Her eyes sparkled with speculation. "One can't help wondering." Before Emma could formulate a response that would neither confirm nor deny any romantic connection, a commotion near the edge of the square drew their attention. A man on horseback had arrived, dismounting with the unsteady movements of someone who had been drinking. Recognition hit Emma like a physical blow. Though his back was turned, she would know that set of shoulders, that particular swagger anywhere. Thomas. Ice flooded her veins as she instinctively stepped behind a nearby pillar, clutching Lily tightly to her chest. "Mrs. Blackburn," she whispered urgently. "Where is Isaac?" The older woman, sensing her distress, glanced between Emma and the newcomer. "By the musician's stand, I believe. Mrs. Atkins, are you unwell? You've gone quite pale. Please," Emma begged, "find Mr. Lawrence. Tell him the past has caught up with us." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Blackburn's eyes. Without further questions, she nodded briskly and moved through the crowd with remarkable speed for a woman of her stature. Emma pressed herself against the building, heart hammering. Thomas was asking questions, his voice carrying even over the festival noise, demanding, insistent. Someone pointed toward the square's center. He turned, giving Emma a clear view of his face for the first time. He looked both familiar and strange. The handsome features that had once charmed her were now flushed with alcohol and hardened by anger. His clothes were disheveled, his hair unkempt. This was Thomas at his most dangerous, just sober enough to function, but drunk enough to have lost all restraint. "I'm looking for my wife," he announced loudly, causing conversations nearby to falter. "Emma Atkins, brown hair, green eyes, traveling with my infant daughter. I have reason to believe she's in Shoshone." The crowd's confused murmuring increased. Emma heard fragments: widow, Lawrence Ranch. Resemblance and new discovery was moments away. She scanned desperately for escape routes, but Thomas stood between her and the wagon. The only option was to circle the square through the crowd and hope to reach Isaac before being spotted. Taking a deep breath, Emma adjusted her bonnet to shield her face and stepped out, moving briskly toward where Mrs. Blackburn had indicated Isaac would be. Lily, perhaps sensing her mother's tension, remained blessedly quiet. Emma had nearly reached the musician's platform when a rough hand clamped onto her arm, spinning her around. Thomas's face, inches from hers, contorted with triumph. "There you are, wife," he hissed, his breath sour with whiskey. "Thought you could run from me." "Let me go, Thomas," Emma said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "You're making a scene." "A scene," he laughed harshly. "You steal my child, my money, disappear for weeks, and you're worried about a scene." His grip tightened painfully. "We're going home. Now." "No." The word emerged stronger than Emma expected. "We're not going anywhere with you." Thomas's expression darkened. "You don't have a choice. You're my wife. She's my daughter." His free hand reached for Lily, who began to cry at the sudden tension and loud voices. "Take your hands off them." Isaac's voice cut through the crowd's nervous murmurs, deadly quiet but carrying unmistakable authority. Thomas turned, Lily's wails increasing as Emma clutched her protectively. "Who the hell are you?" "Isaac Lawrence," came the level reply as Isaac moved to stand beside Emma. "This is my town, my festival, and Mrs. Atkins is under my protection." Thomas sneered. "Mrs. Atkins is my wife, and I'll thank you to mind your own business, rancher." By now, a circle had formed around them, the festive atmosphere completely evaporated. Sheriff Callahan pushed through, hand resting on his holstered pistol. "What's the trouble here?" "No trouble at all, Sheriff," Thomas said, adopting a reasonable tone that Emma recognized as his most dangerous. "Just collecting my wife and child who ran off during a misunderstanding." "It was more than a misunderstanding," Emma stated, finding courage in Isaac's solid presence beside her. "You threatened our lives." Thomas's face twisted with rage before he controlled it. "She's distraught, confused, been having spells since the baby came, imagining things." He addressed the sheriff directly. "You know how women get." Sheriff Callahan's gaze moved between them, resting finally on the crying infant. "Mrs. Atkins, is this man your lawful husband?" Emma swallowed hard. "Yes," she admitted. "But then I'm afraid the law is clear," the sheriff interrupted, his expression regretful. "A woman's place is with her husband and a child with its father." "Unless," Mrs. Blackburn interjected, stepping forward with remarkable poise, "there is evidence of cruelty or endangerment." She fixed Thomas with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Atkins, are you denying that you struck your wife?" Thomas's confidence faltered momentarily before he recovered. "I deny ever raising a hand to my wife in anger. Emma has always been delicate, prone to exaggeration." "Really?" Isaac's voice remained calm, but Emma felt the tension radiating from him. "Then how do you explain the bruises she was wearing when I found her? The terror in her eyes at the mention of your name? The way your own daughter cries at the sound of your voice?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thomas, sensing public opinion turning against him, changed tactics. "This is ridiculous. I've ridden for days searching for my family, worried sick, only to find my wife has taken up with some rancher." He reached again for Emma. "We're leaving." "No." Isaac stepped between them, his stance wide, shoulders squared. "She stays if she wants to stay." For a tense moment, it seemed Thomas might attack Isaac then and there. Sheriff Callahan intervened, placing a restraining hand on Thomas's arm. "This isn't the time or place, Atkins. There's a child present." "Fine," Thomas spat, shaking off the sheriff's grip. "We'll do this properly." He fixed Emma with a cold stare. "I'll be at the hotel tomorrow morning. I expect you and my daughter at the stagecoach, or I'll return with papers from the territorial court demanding my parental rights." With that, he stalked off toward the hotel, the crowd parting silently before him. Emma remained frozen until his figure disappeared through the hotel doors. Only then did her knees begin to buckle. Isaac caught her before she could fall, his arm strong around her waist. "Breathe," he instructed quietly. "You're safe." "For now," Emma whispered, the enormity of what had just occurred washing over her. Thomas had found them. The fragile peace she had begun to build at Cottonwood Ranch lay shattered at her feet. Sheriff Callahan approached, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Atkins, I wish I could offer more assistance, but the law gives a husband certain rights. Unless you can prove mistreatment." "Surely her word should count for something," Nora protested, having pushed through to join them. "It should," the sheriff agreed, "but often doesn't, especially against a man who can present himself well when sober." "He'll take Lily," Emma said, the fear making her voice tremble. "He never wanted her, but he'll take her to punish me." "That won't happen," Isaac stated with quiet certainty. Mrs. Blackburn cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private. My husband's bank has an office that would serve." Within minutes, Emma found herself seated in a comfortable chair in Harold Blackburn's well-appointed office, Lily fussing in her arms. Isaac stood by the window, his posture vigilant as he watched the street outside. Sheriff Callahan leaned against the desk, while the Blackburns and Nora completed the somber gathering. "Options are limited," the sheriff was saying. "Without documentation of abuse, the courts generally side with the husband in these matters." "Even when the husband is clearly unstable," Nora demanded. "Especially then," Mrs. Blackburn interjected with surprising bitterness. "Men protect their own interests." Mr. Blackburn, a portly man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. "There might be another approach." All eyes turned to him. "Mrs. Atkins, forgive my bluntness, but have you considered remarriage?" "Harold," his wife exclaimed. "I'm being practical, my dear," he continued. "In the territories, a woman's status changes completely when she remarries. A new husband would have legal standing to contest any claim Atkins makes on the child." "But I'm not divorced," Emma pointed out. "There are circumstances where a marriage can be considered abandoned," Mr. Blackburn explained. "If a husband deserts his family for a certain period, or if extreme cruelty can be proven." "Which brings us back to our original problem," the sheriff interjected. "Proof." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Lily's whimpers. Emma rocked her gently, mind racing. The situation seemed impossible. Return to Thomas and endure who knew what horrors, or flee again, living forever as fugitives. "There's another way," Isaac said suddenly, turning from the window. His expression was determined, his voice steady. "Emma could marry me." 5 pairs of eyes fixed on him in varying degrees of shock. Nora recovered first, a smile spreading across her face. "Brother, your timing could use work, but I can't fault your solution." "Isaac," Emma breathed, unable to form a coherent response. He crossed to her, kneeling so they were at eye level. "Hear me out. Blackburn's right, a new husband would have legal standing. We could be married tomorrow before Thomas tries to take you away." "But you don't." Emma struggled to articulate the obvious objection. "I care for you," Isaac said simply. "For both of you, more than I expected to, more than might be wise given how short a time we've known each other." His eyes, usually so guarded, were open and vulnerable. "It wouldn't be just a legal arrangement, Emma. Not for me." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. The practical benefits were clear protection for herself and Lily, legal standing against Thomas's claims, security at Cottonwood Ranch. But marriage, to a man she'd known barely 6 weeks, and yet, hadn't she already seen more of Isaac's true character in those weeks than she'd discovered about Thomas in months of courtship? Hadn't she already begun to trust him with not just her safety but her hopes, her small joys, her daily concerns? "Isaac, are you certain?" she asked, searching his face. "This isn't just duty." A rare smile touched his lips. "Duty brought you to my ranch, Emma. Something else entirely makes me want you to stay." The simple declaration, spoken without flourish but with profound sincerity, moved Emma more than any elaborate profession of love could have. This was Isaac, straightforward, honorable, saying exactly what he meant. "There would be talk," she warned. "Let them talk," he replied, unconcerned. "It wouldn't be easy. Lily isn't your child." "She could be," Isaac said softly, "in all the ways that matter." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. What if your feelings change? What if you regret taking on another man's family?" Isaac took her free hand in his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Emma, I've lived my whole life making considered decisions. Never once have I offered marriage to anyone. I wouldn't start now if I wasn't completely certain." Mrs. Blackburn cleared her throat delicately. "If I might interject, Mrs. Atkins, I've known Isaac Lawrence since he was a boy. If he gives his word, you can build your life on it." "It's true," Sheriff Callahan added. "His father was the same way, salt of the earth." Emma looked down at Lily, now quieted and regarding Isaac with curious eyes. Then to Nora, who nodded encouragement. Finally, she met Isaac's steady gaze again. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Lawrence." The tension in the room broke, replaced by a sense of purpose. Plans were quickly made. The minister would perform the ceremony at dawn in the church, with the Blackburns and Sheriff Callahan as witnesses. Nora would return to the ranch with the wagon to prepare, while Emma and Lily would stay at the Blackburns' home to avoid any confrontation with Thomas. "What about after?" Emma asked hesitantly as they prepared to leave the bank. "Thomas won't simply disappear." "One step at a time," Isaac counseled. "First, we make sure he has no legal claim on you or Lily. Then we deal with whatever comes next." His confidence steadied Emma. As they parted Isaac and Nora heading for the wagon, Emma and Lily escorted to the Blackburns' residence, he caught her hand briefly, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Until tomorrow," he said, the simple farewell carrying the weight of promise. That night, as Emma lay in the Blackburns' guest room with Lily sleeping beside her, she contemplated the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 3 months ago, she had been a desperate woman trapped in a destructive marriage. 6 weeks ago, she had stood at a crossroads, literally and figuratively, with no clear path forward. And tomorrow, she would marry a man who had stepped into her life like a character from some improbable novel, the taciturn cowboy with a heart of gold. Was she making another mistake, rushing from one marriage to another? The question nagged at her until she remembered the fundamental difference. Thomas had charmed her with words while showing nothing of his true self. Isaac had revealed his character through actions while saying little. One had promised everything and delivered pain. The other had promised nothing but offered safety, respect, and now a future. Dawn arrived with clear skies and a crisp autumn chill. "Mrs. Blackburn helped Emma dress in a borrowed gown of pale blue silk, my second best," she explained with a wink. "But it suits you better than it ever suited me." The church stood quiet and dignified in the early morning light, its modest steeple reaching toward a sky painted in pastel hues. Inside, candles illuminated the simple sanctuary where Isaac waited at the altar, looking both solemn and somehow younger in his best suit, freshly shaved, his usually windswept hair neatly combed. Sheriff Callahan stood beside him as best man, while Nora held Lily, who was mercifully content in her new dress sewn hastily the night before. The Blackburns positioned themselves in the front pew, their presence lending social legitimacy to the hastily arranged ceremony. As Emma walked down the short aisle alone, she felt a strange sense of rightness despite the unusual circumstances. When she reached Isaac's side and placed her hand in his, the warmth of his grip communicated everything words could not: reassurance, protection, promise. Reverend Wallace, a kindly older man who had agreed to the early hour without question once the situation was explained, conducted the ceremony with simple dignity. The traditional vows took on new meaning in the context of their unusual courtship, for better, for worse, carrying the weight of challenges already faced together and those surely to come. When Isaac slipped his mother's wedding ring onto Emma's finger, the same ring he had lent her for appearance's sake in town, now bestowed in earnest, she felt tears threatening. This was no convenient arrangement, no mere legal strategy. The tenderness in Isaac's eyes as he repeated his vows told her that, despite the haste and unusual circumstances, his heart was fully engaged in this commitment. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Wallace concluded. "Mr. Lawrence, you may kiss your bride." Isaac hesitated, perhaps uncertain of Emma's comfort with such a display. She resolved his dilemma by rising slightly on her tiptoes and pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief but genuine, a seal on their unlikely union. "Mrs. Lawrence," he murmured as they parted, testing the sound of her new name. Emma smiled through tears. "Indeed I am." The small gathering moved to the church steps for congratulations. The rising sun cast long shadows across the town square, still quiet in the early hour. Their moment of peaceful celebration was short-lived, however, as the hotel door across the square banged open. Thomas Atkins stood on the threshold, clearly having just risen, his expression darkening as he took in the scene before the church. Even at a distance, Emma could read the progression of emotions across his face: confusion, comprehension, fury. "You," he shouted, pointing at Emma as he strode toward them. "What have you done?" Sheriff Callahan moved to intercept him, one hand raised in warning. "That's far enough, Atkins." "What's happening here?" Thomas demanded, glaring past the sheriff at Emma and Isaac. "Some kind of trick." "No trick," the sheriff replied evenly. "Just a wedding. May I present Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Lawrence?" Thomas's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. She's my wife." "Not anymore," Mr. Blackburn interjected, stepping forward with the authority of his position. "The marriage has been properly solemnized by an ordained minister before witnesses. Mrs. Atkins is now Mrs. Lawrence, and her daughter is under her new husband's protection." "This isn't legal," Thomas sputtered. "She can't marry when she's already married to me." "According to territorial law," Sheriff Callahan countered, "abandonment constitutes grounds for dissolution of a marriage contract. You left your wife without support, forcing her to flee. The law recognizes her right to security with a new husband." Emma knew the sheriff was stretching the truth of her situation, possibly beyond legal limits, but she remained silent. Thomas, despite his anger, was intelligent enough to recognize the united front before him: the sheriff, the banker, the minister, and the most respected rancher in the county, all standing with Emma. "I want my daughter," he said finally, his voice cold with controlled fury. "Lily stays with her mother," Isaac replied, speaking for the first time. His tone was level but left no room for argument. Thomas's gaze shifted to Isaac, sizing him up. Whatever he saw must have given him pause, for he took a half step back. "This isn't over," he warned. "I have rights." "You forfeited those rights," Isaac stated. "I suggest you return to Cooper's Ridge, Mr. Atkins. There's nothing for you here." For a tense moment it seemed Thomas might lunge at them, consequences be damned. Then, with a visible effort, he mastered himself. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he spat, before turning on his heel and storming back toward the hotel. "He'll be back," Sheriff Callahan warned as they watched Thomas's retreating form. "We'll be ready," Isaac replied simply, his arm sliding protectively around Emma's waist. The confrontation cast a shadow over what should have been a joyous morning, but as they prepared to return to Cottonwood Ranch, Emma refused to let fear overshadow the significance of the step she had taken. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Isaac beside her, not as a desperate woman alone with her child, but as part of a family, a partnership. The journey back to the ranch passed in a curious mixture of tension and tentative happiness. Nora rode ahead with the ranch hand who had accompanied her, tactfully giving the newlyweds privacy in the wagon. Lily slept peacefully in Emma's arms, exhausted from the morning's events. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked as Shoshone receded behind them. "Yes," Emma replied honestly. "Worried about what Thomas might do next, but not sorry for what we've done." Isaac's hands tightened on the reins. "He won't give up easily." "I know." Emma studied her husband's profile, the words still new and strange in her mind. "But neither will we." A ghost of a smile touched Isaac's lips. "No, we won't." As Cottonwood Ranch came into view, Emma was struck by how quickly it had come to feel like home. The sight of the two-story house with its welcoming porch, the neat outbuildings, the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully all represented security and possibility in a way she had thought lost forever. The ranch hands had gathered in the yard, alerted by Nora to expect not just their employer but a new mistress of the house. Their curious glances quickly gave way to genuine congratulations as Isaac formally introduced Emma as his wife. "Didn't know the boss had it in him to court so quick," one older cowboy commented with a wink that made Emma blush. "But we're mighty pleased to have you officially, madam. That little one, too." The day passed in a blur of activity. Word spread quickly, and by afternoon, neighbors began arriving with gifts and well-wishes, jars of preserves, hand-stitched linens, a beautifully carved wooden cradle that a shy ranch hand presented for Lily. Through it all, Emma observed Isaac with new eyes. The man who had seemed so reserved, almost stern, moved through the impromptu celebration with quiet pride, accepting congratulations with grace, introducing Emma as "my wife," with a note of wonder in his voice that touched her deeply. As twilight fell, the last visitors departed, leaving the new family alone. Nora had tactfully announced her intention to spend the night with a neighbor, giving the newlyweds privacy in a way that made both Emma and Isaac flush with embarrassment. The moment they had been avoiding thinking about all day had arrived, their first night as husband and wife. Emma put Lily down in her new cradle, then stood uncertainly in the bedroom that had been hers and now would be theirs. Isaac appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hall light. "I can sleep in the spare room," he offered quietly. "I know this marriage happened unconventionally." The consideration in his offer moved Emma. This was the man she had married, someone who thought of her comfort before his own desires. "That won't be necessary," she replied, summoning her courage. "We are properly wed after all." Isaac stepped into the room, closing the door softly behind him. "Emma," he said, his voice gentle, "I meant what I said at the Blackburns yesterday. This isn't just a legal arrangement for me, but I don't expect." He cleared his throat. "That is, I know you need time." Emma crossed to him, resting her hands lightly on his chest. She could feel his heart beating rapidly beneath her palms. "Isaac Lawrence," she said softly, "you found me at a crossroads, quite literally. You offered protection when I needed it most. You've treated my daughter as your own from the first moment. And now you've given us your name, your home, your promise of a future." She met his gaze steadily. "I may have married you hastily, but not thoughtlessly." Something sparked in Isaac's eyes, hope, desire, tenderness all mingled together. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Emma continued, sliding her arms around his neck, "that while I didn't expect to find love again so soon or in such unusual circumstances, it seems I have." Isaac's breath caught. His hands came to rest at her waist, warm and tentative. "Emma, are you certain?" "I don't want you to feel obligated." In answer, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. Unlike the chaste kiss at their wedding, this one lingered, deepened, conveying what words could not. Isaac responded with restrained passion, his arms tightening around her as if she were precious and fragile. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Emma saw in her husband's eyes the same wonder she felt, that amid chaos and danger, they had somehow found each other, two souls connecting in the vast Wyoming wilderness. "I love you," Isaac said simply, the words clearly unpracticed but all the more meaningful for their raw honesty. "And I love you," Emma replied, surprised by how naturally the declaration came, how right it felt. As moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver patterns across the bedroom floor, Emma and Isaac discovered each other with gentle exploration and growing passion. The world outside, with its threats and complications, receded, leaving only the profound connection between two people who had found in each other not just safety but joy. Later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, Lily sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby, Emma felt a sense of completion she had never known before. This was what a true partnership felt like: mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love born not of desperate need but of genuine admiration. "What are you thinking?" Isaac murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That life takes strange turns," Emma replied, nestling closer. "6 weeks ago I was lost and afraid. Now I'm here with you, feeling like I've found where I belong." Isaac pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You have found where you belong. You and Lily both." The certainty in his voice banished the last of Emma's doubts. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, Thomas's threats, legal battles, the everyday trials of ranch life, they would face them together. Not as a desperate woman and her reluctant protector, but as husband and wife, partners in every sense of the word. The next morning brought clear skies and a sense of new beginning. Emma woke to find Isaac already dressed, standing by the window with Lily in his arms. The sight of her tall, strong husband cradling her daughter with such natural tenderness filled her heart to overflowing. "Good morning, wife," he said, turning at the sound of her movement. The word carried a hint of wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe their changed circumstances. "Good morning, husband," Emma replied, sitting up. "I see you two are already acquainted." Isaac glanced down at Lily, who had wrapped her tiny fingers around one of his. "She's got a strong grip. Going to be willful, I expect. Like her mother?" Emma asked with a smile. "Exactly like her mother," Isaac agreed, crossing to sit beside her on the bed. "Brave, determined, beautiful." The compliments brought color to Emma's cheeks. This was another side of Isaac she was discovering. Beneath the reserved exterior lay a man capable of deep feeling and, it seemed, surprising romance. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Isaac moved instantly to the window, his body tensing. "Sheriff Callahan," he reported, relaxing slightly, "and Judge Harmon with him." Emma dressed quickly while Isaac went to greet their visitors. By the time she joined them in the parlor, coffee had been served and the men were engaged in serious conversation. "Mrs. Lawrence," Sheriff Callahan rose as she entered, nodding respectfully. "Sorry to disturb you so early." "Not at all," Emma replied, noting the formal use of her new name. "Is something wrong, Judge Harmon?" A dignified man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes cleared his throat. "I understand congratulations are in order, though the circumstances are unusual." "Thank you, Your Honor," Emma said, taking a seat beside Isaac, who immediately placed a supportive hand over hers. "I'll be direct," the judge continued. "Thomas Atkins visited me last night, demanding I invalidate your marriage and restore his parental rights. He was quite insistent and quite intoxicated." A cold knot formed in Emma's stomach. "And your response?" "I informed him that, while the legality of your situation is complicated, I would need to hear all sides before making any determination." Judge Harmon's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Lawrence, I must ask, were you indeed mistreated by your former husband?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Your Honor. He struck me on multiple occasions and threatened harm to our child." "Can you provide witnesses or evidence?" "No, sir," Emma admitted. "Thomas was careful. The abuse happened in private." Judge Harmon nodded thoughtfully. "Unfortunately, that's often the case." He turned to Isaac. "And you, Lawrence? You were aware of the situation when you married Mrs. Atkins?" "I was," Isaac replied without hesitation. I found her at a crossroads with a bruised face and a crying baby, clearly terrified of returning to Cooper's Ridge. Everything I've learned since has only confirmed her account. Your reputation in this county is beyond reproach, Judge Harmon acknowledged. That carries weight with me. He steepled his fingers, considering. Here's where we stand. Legally, the situation is ambiguous. Mrs. Lawrence did not obtain a formal divorce before remarrying. However, there is precedent in the territories for considering a marriage dissolved when abandonment or extreme cruelty can be established. Thomas abandoned his responsibilities, Isaac stated firmly. Even if he didn't physically leave, he failed as a husband and father in every way that matters. A court might agree, Judge Harmon said, especially given the support of respected community members like yourself and the Blackburns. But it would mean a public hearing, testimony about private matters, possible appeals. He glanced sympathetically at Emma. It could be a lengthy and difficult process. What are you suggesting, Judge? Sheriff Callahan asked. A simpler solution, Judge Harmon replied. Mr. Atkins is not from Wyoming originally, correct? No, Emma confirmed. He came from Missouri about 2 years ago, and his ties to Cooper's Ridge are mining interests, Isaac supplied, though from what I've heard his ventures haven't been particularly successful. Judge Harmon nodded slowly. Then perhaps a financial arrangement might resolve the matter, a sum sufficient to facilitate Mr. Atkins's return to Missouri or elsewhere, in exchange for signed papers relinquishing all claims to Mrs. Lawrence and the child. Emma stared at him in disbelief. You're suggesting we pay him to leave? I'm suggesting, Judge Harmon said carefully, that some men value money more than pride or revenge, especially men in financial difficulty. Isaac's expression had turned thoughtful. It would be cleaner than a court battle, he admitted, and faster. But it feels wrong, Emma protested, rewarding him after what he did. Not rewarding, Sheriff Callahan interjected, removing. Sometimes the cheapest solution is the one that costs money. The men continued discussing amounts and approaches while Emma sat in silent conflict. Part of her recoiled at the idea of Thomas profiting from their suffering. Yet another part, the practical part that had survived his abuse and found the courage to flee, recognized the wisdom in ending the matter quickly and decisively. I'll speak to him, Isaac finally decided. Offer $500 and passage to St. Louis or Denver, his choice, in exchange for legal documents surrendering all claims and agreeing never to contact Emma or Lily again. A generous offer, Judge Harmon commented. If he refuses, we proceed with a formal hearing on the validity of the marriages and custody of the child. And if he accepts but later returns? Emma asked, voicing her deepest fear. Sheriff Callahan's expression hardened. Then he faces charges of extortion and violation of a legal agreement. I'd personally escort him to territorial prison. The plan was set in motion that very day. Judge Harmon and Sheriff Callahan returned to Shoshone to present the offer to Thomas, while Isaac and Emma waited anxiously at Cottonwood Ranch. What if he refuses? Emma asked as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Then we fight, Isaac replied simply. In court, through legal means. And if that fails, Isaac turned to her, his expression grave, it won't come to that. But if it did, there are places we could go, Canada, California, somewhere beyond his reach. The fact that Isaac had contemplated such possibilities that he was prepared to uproot his entire life, leave the ranch that had been in his family for generations to protect her and Lily, moved Emma beyond words. I hope it doesn't come to that, she said softly. This is your home, our home now. Isaac covered her hand with his. Home is wherever you and Lily are, Emma. The land, the buildings, they're just things. Important things with history and meaning, but still just things. Before she could respond, the sound of an approaching rider caused them both to tense. They rose as Sheriff Callahan rode into the yard, his expression unreadable until he dismounted and approached the porch. "It's done," he announced without preamble. Atkins took the money and signed the papers. Judge Harmon witnessed everything, made it all legal and binding. Relief washed over Emma, so intense she had to grip the porch railing for support. "He agreed, just like that." "Not just like that," the sheriff admitted. There was cursing, threats, attempts at negotiation, but in the end, $500 was more persuasive than pride. "Where is he now?" Isaac asked, his arm sliding protectively around Emma's waist. "On the evening stage to Cheyenne. From there, he said he's heading to California. Gold Fields." Sheriff Callahan removed his hat, wiping his brow. "I watched him board myself. Didn't take my eyes off him until that stage was out of sight." "Thank you," Emma whispered, tears of relief filling her eyes. The sheriff nodded acknowledgement. "Judge Harmon has the signed documents. He'll file them officially tomorrow. As far as the law is concerned, Thomas Atkins has no claim on you or your daughter anymore." He replaced his hat, preparing to leave. "Congratulations, Mrs. Lawrence. You're truly free now." As Sheriff Callahan rode away, Emma turned into Isaac's embrace, allowing the tears to flow freely. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of lingering fear finally released, and beneath it all, tears of joy that the future she had begun to imagine might now become reality. "It's over," Isaac murmured into her hair, holding her close. "He's gone. You think he'll stay away?" Emma asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Yes," Isaac replied with certainty. "Men like Thomas value themselves above all else. He took the easier path, money in hand, rather than an uncertain legal battle. His type doesn't look back." Emma wanted to believe him. And as the days passed with no sign of Thomas, as autumn deepened toward winter and life at Cottonwood Ranch settled into peaceful routine, she gradually allowed herself to trust that this chapter had truly closed. Their first month as husband and wife brought both challenges and unexpected joys. Emma discovered that Isaac, for all his competence with ranch matters, was endearingly awkward in some aspects of domestic life. He entered their bedroom each night with the same shy hesitance, as if still uncertain of his welcome. He would watch in fascination as she brushed her hair before bed, sometimes reaching out to touch the long strands with wonder in his eyes. For her part, Emma had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the pre-dawn risings during calving season, the constant vigilance required for the cattle's health and safety, the way weather dictated every aspect of their days. Isaac proved a patient teacher, explaining without condescension, praising her quick adaptability. Lily thrived in her new environment. At 4 months, she was becoming more responsive each day, smiling readily, especially at Isaac, whose gruff exterior melted completely in her presence. More than once, Emma found him in the nursery they had created, reading aloud from ranch ledgers or agricultural journals to the attentive infant. "She won't understand a word," Emma teased one evening, leaning against the doorframe as Isaac described cattle breeding practices to their wide-eyed daughter. "Gets her used to my voice," he replied, unembarrassed. "Besides, it's never too early to learn about good stock management." Emma laughed, crossing to kiss his cheek. "You're going to make her the most knowledgeable rancher in Wyoming before she can even walk." "Nothing wrong with that," Isaac grinned, an expression that still transformed his usually solemn face. "Lawrence women have always been capable." The casual inclusion of Lily under the Lawrence name warmed Emma's heart. Isaac had never once referred to her as his stepdaughter or made any distinction between his commitment to Emma and his devotion to Lily. In his mind, they were simply his family, complete and indivisible. Winter arrived with its first snowfall in early December, blanketing Cottonwood Ranch in pristine white. The Christmas season brought a festive atmosphere despite the isolation that heavy snows imposed. Nora, who had moved to a small cabin on the property to give the newlyweds privacy while remaining close enough to help with Lily, supervised the decoration of the house with pine boughs, red ribbons, and candles. On Christmas Eve, as they gathered in the parlor before a blazing fire, Isaac surprised Emma with a small velvet box. "I wanted to give you something that was just for you," he explained as she opened it to reveal a delicate gold locket. "Not practical, not for the ranch or the baby. Just because you deserve beautiful things." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she opened the locket to find a tiny portrait of Lily on one side while the other held a lock of dark hair. "Is this?" "Mine," Isaac confirmed, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's an old custom. Thought it might be nice for you to have something of both of us with you always." The thoughtfulness of the gift overwhelmed Emma. This man, who spoke so little and felt so deeply, had considered not just her needs but her desires, her feminine appreciation for sentiment and beauty. "I love it," she whispered, immediately fastening it around her neck. "And I love you, Isaac Lawrence." His answering smile, rare and wonderful, was the greatest gift she could have received. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Lawrence." As winter deepened, bringing short days and long nights, Emma and Isaac's bond strengthened through shared work and quiet evenings by the fire. They discovered common interests, a love of reading, appreciation for music, though Isaac claimed no talent for it, enjoyment of chess games that could stretch for hours, each contemplating moves with equal seriousness. They also discovered differences that complemented rather than divided. Emma's more expressive nature brought laughter and spontaneity to Isaac's ordered world. His steady pragmatism balanced her occasional flights of fancy. Together, they created a household that hummed with purpose and warmth. By the time spring arrived, melting the snow and turning the pastures a vibrant green, Emma could scarcely remember a time when she hadn't been at Cottonwood Ranch, hadn't been Isaac's wife. The memories of Cooper's Ridge and Thomas had faded to occasional nightmares that grew less frequent with each passing month. One bright May morning, as they sat together on the porch watching Lily, now 9 months old, attempt to crawl across a blanket spread on the grass, Emma turned to Isaac with sudden conviction. "I want her to have your name," she said. "Officially." Isaac looked at her quizzically. "She already carries the Lawrence name as your daughter." "I mean legally," Emma clarified. "I want you to adopt her. She should be yours in every way, not just through marriage to me." Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes, followed by a flash of emotion so powerful it took Emma's breath away. "You're certain?" "Absolutely certain," Emma replied. "You're the only father she's ever known, the only one who has ever loved her. It should be official." Isaac swallowed hard, clearly moved beyond his ability to express. "I would be honored," he managed finally. "More than honored. It would make official what I've felt from the beginning, that she's mine to love and protect, just as you are." The adoption was formalized in Judge Harmon's office the following week, a simple procedure that nonetheless held profound meaning for their small family. Lily Atkins officially became Lily Lawrence, daughter of Isaac and Emma Lawrence of Cottonwood Ranch, Wyoming Territory. As spring blossomed into summer, Emma made an announcement of her own one evening as they sat on their favorite porch swing, watching the sunset. "Isaac," she began, a smile playing at her lips, "how do you feel about expanding our family?" He glanced at her, then back at the horizon, seemingly processing her question literally. "Well, we could always use another hand around the place. Been thinking of offering Sam Jenkins a permanent position. Good with horses, that boy." Emma laughed, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "I wasn't thinking of hiring husband." Isaac froze, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. "Emma, are you?" "Yes," she confirmed, joy bubbling in her voice. "Dr. Simmons confirmed it yesterday. We're expecting a baby in January." For a moment, Isaac seemed unable to speak. Then, with uncharacteristic impulsiveness, he swept Emma into his arms, lifting her from the swing and spinning her in a circle that left her breathless with laughter. "Careful," she protested through her giggles. "I'm in a delicate condition, remember." Isaac set her gently on her feet, but kept his arms around her, his expression a mixture of wonder, excitement, and tender concern. "A baby," he murmured, one hand moving reverently to rest against her still flat abdomen. "Our baby. Our baby," Emma echoed, covering his hand with hers. "Lily will have a brother or sister." "She'll be a wonderful big sister," Isaac predicted, drawing Emma close again. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what? For everything. For staying that day at the Crossroads, for trusting me, for making my house a home, for giving me a family I never dared hope for." Emma tilted her face up to his, recognizing in his heartfelt words the depth of feeling this quiet man had always been capable of, even when he struggled to express it. "Thank you for being the kind of man worth trusting," she replied softly. "The kind of man who sees a woman and child in trouble and says, 'You'll go where I'm headed, not back there.'" As the last rays of sunlight gilded the distant mountains, Emma and Isaac sealed their shared gratitude with a kiss that held all the promise of their unexpected love story, a tale that had begun with a desperate meeting at a dusty crossroads, and had led, through courage and faith and second chances, to the creation of a family bound not by circumstance but by choice, not by obligation but by love. In the years that followed, Cottonwood Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Isaac James Lawrence arrived that January, a healthy, robust boy with his father's thoughtful eyes and his mother's determined spirit. He was joined 2 years later by sister Nora Elizabeth, named for her beloved aunt, who had by then married the widowed doctor from Shoshone, establishing her own household but remaining a constant presence in their lives. Lily grew into a confident, capable young woman who showed a remarkable affinity for ranching just like her father, people would comment, forgetting or never knowing that Isaac was not her biological parent. The bond between them was so natural, so complete, that blood seemed irrelevant compared to the love and guidance he had provided from her earliest memories. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on that same porch swing watching their children play in the yard that had seen so much life and love, Emma turned to Isaac with a contented smile. "Any regrets?" she asked, knowing the answer but wanting to hear it nonetheless. Isaac considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness, his gaze taking in the thriving ranch, the laughing children, the home they had built together. "Just one," he finally replied, his eyes crinkling with the smile that had become much more frequent over the years. "Oh." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "That I didn't find you sooner," he said simply, drawing her close against his side. "Every day with you has been a gift, Emma Lawrence, one I never take for granted." As the Wyoming sun set on another day at Cottonwood Ranch, Emma rested her head on her husband's shoulder, secure in the knowledge that the desperate woman at the crossroads and the lonely cowboy who had found her there had both discovered what they truly sought, not just safety or duty, but the profound blessing of a love that had transformed them both, creating from their separate journeys a shared path neither could have imagined, but both would travel gratefully for all their days.